Unfortunately, the engagement is off, I announced in front of everyone. 4 years later, at my new wedding, my sister arrived uninvited, raising her glass to speak. I never thought my wedding day would become the stage for the revenge I'd waited years to get, but looking back, it was the perfect ending to the nightmare my family put me through. Let me take you back to where it all began. I'm Patricia, 32, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. While most kids were enjoying weekend sleepovers and summer vacations, I was studying, working part-time jobs, and building a future. My sister, Stella, 3 years younger, was the complete opposite, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Growing up, the contrast between us was stark. I graduated with honors, earned scholarships, and secured a stable job right out of college. Stella barely passed her classes, dropped out of college twice, and bounced from one minimum wage job to another. Yet somehow my achievements were always expected, while her smallest efforts were celebrated like Olympic victories. Stella got a B in math, my mother would announce proudly at family dinners. Meanwhile, my straight A's were met with nods and quick subject changes. When I landed my first corporate position, my father's response was, "Well, that's what you went to school for, isn't it?" But when Stella held a retail job for 3 whole months without quitting, they took her out to a fancy restaurant to celebrate her commitment. The pattern continued into adulthood. My parents helped Stella with rent, paid off her credit card debt, and even bought her a car after she totaled her previous one while texting and driving. I, on the other hand, was entirely self-sufficient, something they pointed to as proof that they'd raised me right, while simultaneously using it as justification for directing their resources towards Stella. "Your sister needs more help than you do," they'd say whenever I pointed out the disparity. "You've always been able to handle yourself." I tried not to let it bother me. I focused on building my career and my life. By 28, I had a promising position at a marketing firm, a small but stylish apartment, and had just started dating Isaac. Isaac and I met through work. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely impressed by my independence and drive. After a year of dating, he proposed, and I was ecstatic. Finally, I had found someone who valued me for exactly who I was. Looking back, there were warning signs I chose to ignore. The way Isaac's eyes lingered on Stella when I introduced them. How he always seemed a bit too interested in her stories at family gatherings. The casual way he'd mention her, "Your sister's really something, isn't she?" in conversations that had nothing to do with her. But I was too happy, too in love, to see what was right in front of me. Our engagement party was held at my parents' house, a decision I regretted almost immediately. My mother insisted, saying it would be more intimate and save money, though they had rented out a restaurant for Stella's 21st birthday just months before. The evening started well enough. Friends and family gathered in the backyard, drinking champagne under string lights. Isaac was at my side, his arm around my waist as we accepted congratulations. My parents were actually paying attention to me for once, even if most of their comments were along the lines of, "We never thought she'd settle down." About 2 hours into the party, I noticed Isaac was missing. I didn't think much of it at first, bathroom break, getting another drink, mingling with guests. But when 10 minutes turned into 20, I started to look for him. My mother asked me to check if we needed more ice from the basement freezer, so I headed inside. The house was quiet compared to the buzz of conversation outside. I checked the kitchen, the living room, the downstairs bathroom. No Isaac. Something pulled me upstairs, intuition perhaps, or the faint sound of voices I wasn't consciously aware of hearing. I stood there frozen in the doorway of my childhood bedroom, staring at my sister and my fiancé tangled in my sheets, surrounded by my old trophies and awards, achievements my family had never bothered to celebrate. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in each other. When they finally did, the look on Stella's face wasn't even shame. It was annoyance at being interrupted. What happened next was a blur of shouting and tears. I remember Isaac scrambling for his clothes, stammering apologies that meant nothing. Stella cried not because she felt guilty but because she was caught. Guests rushing upstairs at the commotion, and my parents pulled me into the hallway while leaving the two of them to compose themselves. "Patricia, please keep your voice down," my mother hissed, her hand tight around my wrist. "The neighbors will hear." "I don't care. Did you see what they were doing in my bedroom at my engagement party?" My father stepped between us, his voice low and stern. "Patricia, listen to your mother. This isn't the time or place for a scene. A scene, they're the ones who made a scene." What my mother said next broke something inside me that I'm not sure has ever fully healed. Stella made a mistake, but think about the consequences. She's married, Patricia. Think about her husband, their baby on the way. He doesn't need to know about this. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time. The way they immediately jumped to damage control, the concern for Stella's marriage rather than my shattered engagement, they'd covered for her before. And they were right about one thing: Stella was married to a kind, hardworking man named Derek who adored her and had no idea who she really was. They'd been married for 8 months and she was 5 months pregnant with what everyone assumed was their first child. I pushed past my parents and back into the bedroom where Isaac was now fully dressed and Stella was fixing her hair in the mirror like this was just another inconvenience in her day. "How long?" I demanded. Isaac couldn't meet my eyes. "Honey, it was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "How long?" I shouted, my voice breaking. Stella turned from the mirror, her mascara slightly smudged despite her efforts. "Does it matter? It happened. Scream all you want, but it won't change anything." Her callousness stunning me into silence for a moment before something else occurred to me. "The baby," I whispered, the pieces falling into place. "Is it even Derek's?" The flash of panic across Stella's face was all the answer I needed. My parents appeared in the doorway, my mother already strategizing. "Here's what we're going to do. The guests won't know exactly what happened. We'll say Isaac was feeling ill and the engagement is postponed. Patricia, you and I will talk about this tomorrow when everyone's calmer. Stella, fix your dress and go downstairs with your father. Isaac, I think it's best if you leave now." They were already spinning their narrative, already protecting Stella while my life imploded. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. "No, we're not covering this up. We're not pretending this didn't happen." I walked past them, down the stairs, and into the backyard where our guests were mingling, confused by the commotion. I grabbed a champagne glass and a knife, clinking them together until I had everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice wavering only slightly. "Unfortunately, the engagement is off. I just found my sister and my fiancé having sex in my childhood bedroom. So please finish your drinks, take some food home if you'd like, but the celebration is over, just like my relationship." The silence was deafening before erupting into shocked murmurs. I saw my parents' horrified expressions, Isaac's ashen face as he slipped out the side gate, and Stella's husband Derek's confusion turning to devastation as he processed my words. That night, I packed a bag and checked into a hotel. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Isaac begging for forgiveness, my parents demanding I call them immediately, friends offering support, and a single text from Derek asking if we could meet. Over coffee the next day, I told Derek everything. How long I suspected the affair had been going on, my doubts about the baby. He was silent, his hands wrapped around his mug so tightly I thought it might shatter. "I always felt something was off," he finally said. The way she'd get defensive about her phone, disappearing for hours with vague explanations. "Your parents told me I was being paranoid." Of course they did. They'd been enabling Stella's behavior her entire life. Why stop now? The aftermath was nuclear. Derek demanded a paternity test which confirmed what we already knew: the baby wasn't his. He filed for divorce immediately. My relationship with my parents deteriorated as they accused me of deliberately destroying my sister's life over one mistake. One mistake? I had laughed bitterly during our last real conversation. She slept with my fiancé at my engagement party while pregnant with his child and passing it off as her husband's. That's not one mistake, that's a calculated series of betrayals. "She's still your sister," my father had insisted. "Family forgives." Then I guess I'm not family anymore. I cut contact with all of them, changed my number, blocked them on social media, and focused on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I left my job to avoid seeing Isaac and took a position at a smaller firm across town. I started therapy to work through my trust issues in the lifetime of being second best to Stella. I leaned on the few friends who had stuck by me and slowly, painstakingly, learned to trust again. 3 years later, I met Alexander. He was nothing like Isaac, quieter, more thoughtful, with a dry wit that made me laugh even on my darkest days. He knew my history, had held me through nightmares and panic attacks, and still looked at me like I was the most precious thing in his world. When he proposed after 2 years of dating, I said yes without hesitation. This time, the engagement felt right, a partnership of equals rather than a prize I'd finally earned. We planned a small wedding at a local botanical garden. I had no contact with my family and had no intention of inviting them. Alexander's family had embraced me completely, and my chosen family of close friends was all I needed. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother showed up at my apartment. She looked older, tired in a way I hadn't seen before. "Please," she said when I opened the door, "just hear me out." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She told me how things had fallen apart after I left. Stella's divorce had been messy and public. She'd had the baby, a little girl, but struggled as a single mother. My parents had been supporting them both financially, stretching their retirement savings thin. My father had health problems brought on by stress. "We made mistakes, Patricia, terrible mistakes in how we treated you, but please don't punish your father by excluding him from your wedding. He may not have much time left." I was unmoved by her sudden recognition of their mistakes now that they were facing consequences. But Alexander, kind to a fault, suggested that perhaps this could be a step toward healing. Reluctantly, I agreed that my parents and only my parents could attend the ceremony. I made it explicitly clear that Stella was not welcome. "I understand," my mother said, relief visible on her face. "Just your father and me, I promise." I should have known better than to trust her. Our wedding day dawned clear and perfect. The garden was in full bloom, fairy lights strung through the trees for the evening reception. Alexander's eyes filled with tears when I walked down the aisle in a simple ivory gown, looking nothing like the elaborate princess dress I'd chosen for my first engagement. My parents sat quietly in the back row, my father indeed looking frailer than I remembered. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of, intimate, meaningful, focused on our love rather than an extravagant show. For a few blissful hours, I forgot about the past and lived fully in the moment of marrying the man who had shown me what real partnership looked like. Then came the reception. I was mingling with guests, Alexander's hand warm in mine when a hush fell over one side of the garden. I turned to see what had caused it and felt my blood freeze. There was Stella, dressed in a skin-tight red dress that would have been inappropriate for any wedding, let alone her estranged sister's. Beside her stood our parents, my mother's expression pleading, my father looking everywhere but at me. Alexander felt me tense and followed my gaze. "Is that—" "Yes," I said through gritted teeth. "My sister, who was explicitly not invited." He squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to ask her to leave?" I took a deep breath, considering my options. Making a scene would only disrupt the beautiful day we'd planned. For Alexander's sake, I decided to ignore her presence as long as she kept her distance. "Not yet, let's just keep our distance and enjoy our night." For about an hour, it worked. Stella stayed with my parents at their table, shooting glances my way but not approaching. I tried to focus on our friends, the excellent food, the perfect weather, but I should have known Stella wouldn't let me have even one day that was just about me. Just after the best man's toast, as servers were pouring champagne for the next round of speeches, Stella stood up and clinked her glass with a spoon. The sound cut through the chatter, drawing everyone's attention. "For those who don't know me, I'm Stella, Patricia's sister," she began, her voice carrying across the garden. "I know I wasn't officially on the program, but I couldn't let my big sister's wedding day pass without saying a few words." My mother was tugging at her arm, trying to get her to sit down, but Stella shook her off. My father stared at his plate, shoulders hunched. "Patricia and I have had our differences over the years," she continued, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "But I'm so happy she found someone who truly loves her, this time around." The garden fell silent as everyone felt the barb in her words. Alexander's grip on my hand tightened, but I barely felt it. Something was building inside me, not the familiar hurt or betrayal, but a clear, cold rage that had been waiting 4 years for this exact moment. I have to admit, when Mom said they were coming to the wedding, I was hurt not to get an invitation. After all, what's a little family drama between sisters? Water under the bridge, right? But I'm here now, and I just want to say. I stood up, cutting her off. With deliberate calmness, I walked to where she stood and took the champagne glass from her hand. "Thank you, Stella, for that unexpected toast," I said, my voice steady. "Since you've opened the door to discussing our family history, allow me to fill in some gaps for those who might be confused." I turned to face our guests, who were watching with uncomfortable fascination. 4 years ago, I had another engagement party. My fiancé at the time was a man named Isaac. The party was at my parents' house, and midway through the celebration, I went looking for Isaac. I found him in my childhood bedroom having sex with my sister, who was married and pregnant at the time. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Stella's smug expression faltered. The baby, as a paternity test later confirmed, was Isaac's, not her husband's. My parents, who are sitting right there, I nodded toward them, begged me to keep quiet about the whole thing, to think about how exposure would affect poor Stella's marriage. They were willing to let her husband raise another man's child without his knowledge to protect her reputation. My mother was shaking her head frantically, but I continued. When I refused to participate in the cover-up and told her husband the truth, I was labeled the villain, the troublemaker who couldn't let things go. I cut contact with all of them and rebuilt my life piece by piece. I found a man who respects me, who would never betray me, and I specifically did not invite my sister to share in our happiness because of her history of trying to destroy it. I looked directly at Stella now, whose face had drained of color. Yet here you are, crashing my wedding, making snide comments about my previous engagement, the one you ruined. So let me make something perfectly clear: you are not welcome here. You never were. The only reason I allowed our parents to attend was because they claimed Dad's health was failing and they wanted to make amends. Clearly, that was just another manipulation. I turned to my parents, who seemed to shrink under my gaze. As for you two, you've chosen sides your entire lives, always hers over mine. Even today on my wedding day, you couldn't respect the one boundary I set. You promised she wouldn't come, yet here she is. So make your choice now once and for all. Stay and apologize to me and my husband for this disruption, or leave with her. But understand that whatever you choose today is permanent. The silence that followed was absolute. Alexander had moved to stand beside me, his hand on the small of my back, supportive but letting me fight my own battle. My mother looked at my father, then at Stella, then back at me. After a moment's hesitation that told me everything I needed to know, she stood and gathered her purse. "We should go," she said quietly. My father looked torn, opening his mouth as if to speak, but ultimately he rose shakily to his feet and followed my mother. Stella stood frozen, clearly not expecting this outcome. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and for once in her life, she wasn't getting her way. "Patricia, you can't just—" "Security will escort you out," I said calmly, nodding to the two men Alexander's brother had quietly signaled. "Please don't contact me or my husband again." As they led her away, Stella's mask finally cracked. "You've always been jealous of me," she shouted over her shoulder. "Just because you were never enough." The garden doors closed behind her, cutting off her words. I turned back to our guests, many of whom looked stunned. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, feeling surprisingly light. "Now I believe we were about to dance." Alexander pulled me close as the music started, his eyes filled with pride. "That," he whispered, "was the most badass thing I've ever seen." For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. No more walking on eggshells, no more accepting scraps of attention, no more being the reasonable one while others took advantage. I had finally stood up not just to Stella but to the entire dynamic that had defined my family for decades. The rest of the wedding was perfect, full of laughter, dancing, and genuine joy. When we left for our honeymoon the next day, I didn't check my phone or worry about the fallout. I had said my piece and meant every word. 6 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Stella's life had continued to unravel. Her attempts to reconcile with her ex-husband had failed. She'd lost her job and moved back in with our parents, whose retirement had been derailed by supporting her and her daughter. My father's health had improved once the condition had served its purpose, though he was still dealing with the natural consequences of aging. They've reached out several times, testing whether my boundaries were as firm as I claimed. Each time, I've maintained my position. Sometimes healing means walking away, and sometimes justice is simply living well while toxic people face the natural consequences of their actions. Alexander and I are building the life I always dreamed of, one founded on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine love. We're expecting our first child next spring, a joy I'll guard fiercely from those who have proven they can't be trusted with happiness that isn't their own. Some people say revenge doesn't bring peace, but I disagree. Standing up for myself and finally telling the truth didn't just give me closure, it set me free. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve, and I'm grateful every day for the one I've chosen.